In the last video I showed this Kromrey where it would speed up when you short the output, and it's kind of an interesting concept because the conventional generator does indeed bog down the prime mover. When you short the output, you hardly be able to turn the generator, and because it's back torquing against itself. It's not really anything magical, and like I said, it gives evidence that this is a constant current generator and it's supposed to unload the prime mover, but I'm going to show some more basic principles to show how simple the concept is and why the generator speeds up when you short it out. And I'm going to do that with this little roller skate wheel SG right here. This is the first SG I ever built almost 20 years ago when I first met John Bedini. So the first thing I'm going to show is I'm basically just going to get it up to speed. That'll take a second. I'm just running on this little lithium battery here on a 12 volt battery pack, and what I'm going to do is show you how to generate eddy currents by having a magnet, and it is indeed magnetic. These are neodymium magnets right here, and there's a coil underneath here. This is running in attraction mode. All those details are on BediniSG.com, but in any case, it's more efficient than repulsion mode. South is facing out all the way around it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to speed it up. Or first I might mention that, you know, if you see these experiments where people are showing like a copper tube, and what they do is they take a little magnet and they drop it in it, and it goes really super slow. And a lot of people are showing that as if they discovered some new principle. Some people are trying to trick others, but most people who are watching it with a little background in magnetics and stuff understand that it's an eddy current generator. And so as the magnet is inducing the current into the copper, it creates a counter current that creates a magnetic field that opposes the magnet. And if you have that going on in a tube, that's happening all the way around it, and so as the magnet is falling down, you have these counter currents opposing it from all directions, and that's slowing its descent because it's like pressurizing against it, you can say. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you basically the same thing. I'll just start with this little strip of copper, and as it's speeding up, I'm going to put this on top, and you're going to see this fly away. It's not because of the vibrations or the wind, it's because as the magnet spins past the copper, it's inducing current into the copper, which creates a counter current that creates a magnetic field that opposes the magnet. So if the magnet here is south facing out, that copper is going to have a magnetic field which is south repelling against that magnet, which means as the magnet creates that opposing south in the copper, it's going to obviously repel away. That's used in the garbage recycling industry. It's called eddy current separator, and real simply, let's say you have a conveyor belt with a bunch of stuff moving over it. Let's say you got non-metallic stuff, you got metallic stuff which is ferrous, which will attract to a magnet, and then non-ferrous stuff like that, or aluminum cans, which will not attract to a magnet. So what happens is as the conveyor belt is going along, you have the plastic, well, underneath the end of the conveyor belt is a spinning drum, not facing this way, it'd be turned 90 degrees, spinning this way. And as the belt is coming like this, and you have the stuff coming over that spinning, rotating magnetic field, the plastic is just going to drop right over the edge of the conveyor belt, because the magnetic field's not going to influence it. If it's something magnetic, well, it's going to cling to the belt around that magnetic field, and as it comes underneath, it's clinging to the conveyor belt, it's going to cling underneath, and when it's far enough away, then it's going to release and drop into a bin down here. So you got your non-magnetic stuff here, or non-metallic stuff dropping off right here. You got your magnetic stuff dropping off under here, and if it's non-ferrous like aluminum cans or whatever, it's going to hit that magnetic field and it's going to repel out further into a bin which is further out here. And that's how you separate non-metallic or metallic objects, which are both ferrous and non-ferrous. It's called eddy current separator. So there's nothing magic to it. It's been used in the recycling industry for many years. I discovered this concept on my own before I really ever knew what Lenz's law was, or eddy currents, because I had a piece of silver and I'm thinking, well, you know, with this little SG spinning, how does it affect a piece of non-ferrous metal that's non-magnetic? These are really strong neomagnets right here. You put something on there, you don't want to get two of those magnets side by side, like this one here and that one. You won't get them apart. I mean, you have to slide them apart. You can, but they're really strong. So you can just see that right there. That is a real magnet. This is a piece of silver, 1 ounce silver, obviously not magnetic. Copper, obviously not magnetic. And so what we're going to do is we're going to speed this up, and I'm going to show how it pushes the that copper away. Then I'm going to show how you can bring the ounce of silver towards it, and it creates such an opposing force against that magnet that I can just, it's so overwhelming that it will actually bring the rotor to a standstill. So we're going to do that first, and then we'll move on to a few more experiments and explanations. Have to tune this backwards and forwards because it's non-linear, and when you get to a certain point you actually have to reduce and then increase again to get into higher speeds. That's a whole other topic, but these are actually very non-linear. Okay, so what I'm going to do is we've got a rotating magnetic field here, permanent magnets, and I'm going to put this piece of copper right here, and you can see how it's just drifting away. That's not because of the wind or the vibration. That's because the magnetic field induced in the copper is opposite, or is the same as the magnet, and it's trying to repel away. And that's what it's doing, is pushing away. Okay? So if I take this piece of silver here, all I'm going to do is bring this down like this. You can hear how it's already slowing down because there's so much metal here that the currents induced is creating a strong enough magnetic field to buck against that field. So the silver ounce is actually creating a south magnetic field, which is opposing the magnetic field, and it's going to just bring it to a standstill. And I'm not even touching the magnets, right? So you can see that that piece of silver created a magnetic field to oppose it. So it's called eddy currents, or it's an eddy current generator. And what we're doing is we're basically using Lenz's law. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show putting a coil, I think we're going to use this one right here. Let's see, it's got 163 turns, 4 wires in parallel. This shotgun pellet, real soft stuff, has no magnetic retentivity. You can take the strongest neos you can find, put it on these pellets for as long as you want. When you take it away, these pellets will just all fall apart because they retain none of the magnetism whatsoever. So it's real good for fast off and on times. You got to watch my YouTube channels with Paul Babcock explaining exactly about these pellets, but it's an incredible core material. Cheap too. So what I'm going to do is first I'm going to get this sped up, then I'm going to place the coil, which is shorted, has a alligator clip across the leads. I'm going to set it right there, and so as the magnetic field from the permanent magnet is inducing a current into the coil, when it's shorted, what happens is it creates a countercurrent which has a magnetic field that bucks against it. So if there's a south field sweeping across a shorted coil, that shorted coil in turn is going to create a south field which opposes it. The reason it's going to run faster like that than it will open, let's bring these leads down here so you can see them, like on the Kromrey, it's faster with the coil shorted than without, and the reason is because if you have the coils, the core, let's look at that machine here. So if you have the core right here, which is going to be some type of magnetic material, it's going to be some type of iron, steel, whatever the mixture is, and what that's going to do as it's moving towards the permanent magnet pole here, whichever pole that is, this iron is going to be attracted to it. So you have free attraction because it wants to attract the iron in the core. So you get a benefit there. You get a little acceleration actually as it's moving towards there. So what's happening is that magnetic field is inducing a current into the coil. If that coil is shorted, if all these coils are shorted, it's doing the same thing at all 4 locations. And so what happens is, if this is a north field on the permanent magnet here, and it's inducing a current into the coil is going to create a counter current with the magnetic field that is also going to be north, which is going to oppose that magnetic field. So let's say the circuit is open and it's not shorted. If you have the iron freely attracted to that north field, what happens is that you get a free attraction. But what happens when it wants to pull away? Well, the coils are not charged, and let's say they're completely open circuit. There's nothing going on there. And if it's open circuit, that means there's no magnetic field in the coil. And so all you're doing is you're trying to take an iron core, which is attracted to the magnet, and pull it away, which you're going to get drag, like a magnetic cogging effect, because as you're trying to pull the core away from that magnetic field, it's going to take some strength to do that because it wants to stay attracted to the magnet. So if you short the coils, what's happening is if you short the coils out, the iron is going to be attracted to the core of that north field. If it's shorted, then you're going to create a north field, which in turn is going to oppose that field in the magnet. It's going to be weaker, but it's still going to be a north field. And what that means is, as that magnetic field in that coil is giving off a north field against that magnet, that means it can actually pull away easier because it's not attracted to the magnet. Why? Because if you got a north field, a weak north field coming off this pole, and you got a north field here, you get the free attraction. But what happens is when the north field in the coil is generated, it cancels out its desire to stay attracted to that core, and that's why it can pull away easier. And that's all it really is. And that's why it actually runs faster with the coil shorted. So when you short out the output and it speeds up, that's really what's happening. And that doesn't it doesn't matter if it's the Kromrey generator or any other type of shorting coil concept, which I'll show you some of that here in a second, and why there can be a benefit. But the thing about it is that there's a lot of different things that can be done to the Kromrey that nobody has ever talked about. I don't know, maybe a couple people have kind of read between the lines or applied what they understand with shorting coils at the right time and releasing, and other different things that can be done with the Kromrey to take its performance and utilize all of its advantages to the max. And I don't really see anybody doing that. And so little by little we're going to be moving into some of those concepts. I don't know if it's something we're going to demonstrate at the conference or not. Peter already did a definitive explanation on the machine and showed that it was producing basically twice as much as what was running the motor, about 32 watts running the DC motor, while this had about 72 watts going to a battery. That's a whole other subject. I'm just going over the shorted coil and why it sped up. So again, if the coils are open, the core wants to attract to the magnet, and if the coils are open, the core still wants to stay attracted to the magnet, so it's harder to pull it away. That offers drag, that keeps the speed down. If they're shorted, the iron wants to be attracted to the magnet. Current is being induced right now with the coil shorted, and with the coil shorted you create a magnetic field in here which opposes the same field, which cancels out its desire to stay attracted to the magnet, which means it can pull away easier, which means you got less drag. And that's one of the functions, or that's one of the principles in a low drag or no drag generator. So obviously, reading between the lines, there's different times when to when you want the coil shorted and when you don't. And we're not going to discuss those right now. We're just going over some of these basic principles. So let's look back at this Bedini SG. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to speed this thing up. Okay, so we're going to get the SG up to speed. Then we're going to take this coil, which is shorted, and we're going to put it on top, and we're going to see how it changes the RPM, and then we're going to disconnect it to unshort it and it should slow it down. Now we're going to be looking at the scope over there, so let's just get this thing rolling here. Speed it up a little bit. So 233 hertz average. Here, let's reset that. Should actually be cycles a second, but so we're averaging 222. 223 cycles a second. Hertz really only applies to sine wave AC, and that's it. Okay, so we're at 223. That seems to be a pretty good average speed so far, or it's stable. Okay, and then we're going to add the coil. Which is shorted. Okay, so we had 222, 223. So we're still averaging about 222. The reason it quieted down is because those bearings are so bad that we gave it something in the center to attract to, so it kind of keeps it aligned, and that's why some of the noise is reduced. So what we're seeing here is an average of 222. Okay, drop to 221, so we have 1 cycle a second difference, which is virtually nothing. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to unshort the coil, because right now in this mode, while it's shorted, again, the magnet is inducing a current in here, which is creating a counter current. That magnetic field is going to match the magnetic field that induced it to begin with. So if south is facing out on the coil, or on the magnets, that coil is now producing a south field, which is bucking against that field, which means as the magnet moves towards the core, you get a free attraction, and then as it's shorted, it's creating a south field. It's weaker than the magnet, but it's still a south field, which means what it's doing is it's negating or neutralizing the attraction between the permanent magnet and the core, so that it can move away easier, which means you've reduced the drag on a generator. So I'm going to unshort it now. We're going to let it stabilize for a moment. So we're averaging 220 right now, and that's over the whole time, but what we can see is that if I clear it and take the average right now, it's dropping to 217, but in any case we got 220 right now.